Hi, everyone. Welcome to Fail Forward Live. My name is Michelle Ragusa McBain, and I am so thrilled to have my guest today, Philip de Souza. He is the president and founder of Aurora. He is CEO of hotlunch.com and founder of aniti.org. Philip is an incredibly keen eye for cybersecurity. He is a philanthropist, he is a world traveler, and he is one of my dear friends. Philip, thank you so much for joining us today.
Michelle, thank you so much for having me. I feel like I'm on the A list, a podcast with you. Life couldn't be better. Thank you.
You are the A-list. You brought it with you, so thank you.
You're kind.
So, Philip, for anybody who does not know Aurora or your charitable works, would you mind sharing a little bit about who you are and your company and what you do?
Sure, absolutely. So I'll start with me, go to Aurora and go in the normal lines of transition to the foundation. So born in London a long, long time ago, grew up in India, Portuguese last name, and a little bit of California culture mixed in there. So go figure that one out, right? I started Aurora actually about a year coming into this great country, and through a series of nothing short of miraculous events. We are a cybersecurity company, been in business 30 years. And, of course, thanks to you and the JS group, we are really rocking our brand of recent time. And thank you for everything that you've done for us for putting us on the map, literally. And, it's part of life, right? And growing up and doing things. It's often been said that Americans are the most generous culturally in the world, right? I mean, you took the times when we had 9/11 and Katrina and all those disasters. And what was amazing is that we just kept giving. There was no donor fatigue. We were quick to help. And I'm proud to be part of the group, the part of people who give. And thanks to a peer group that I belong to, there came a point in my life when we had to talk about, we as in the family talk about paying it forward, and that set Aniti in motion. So Aniti is a nonprofit that's specifically meant to empower girls, and we started in India, and we're using technology, which is one of my favorite go-tos, to empower these girls, these little girls who probably without anything would have never seen a computer in their lives. And today we're making a difference in courses and educating them. Their eyes open in wonder, when they see the United States for the first time on Google Maps, and just know that there's a world out there and there are people who are behind them to empower them to do better in a male-dominated society. But, enough of that. Don't get me started. As you can tell, this is a passion of mine.
I love that. And I have a list of questions in order, but I'm going to skip around and just ask this one.
Please.
Why are you so passionate about women and diversity in technology?
Good question. So, mother, sister, wife, daughter, right? We're surrounded. I mean, just look down, and a few inches away is a little belly button that reminds you constantly, right, that women have a huge role to play. And if you don't have a belly button, that's another podcast. For me personally, it was I went along the Maslow's need hierarchy theory. Once I had food and clothing and shelter, there was time to look at the influences in my life. And, it was all of those. It was mom first, sister, wife, daughter, that plays such a vital role. And I've told this story often, watching my daughter grow up, and, we talk now of all these great movements, feminism and Me Too, and all of these influences that in the great times that we're living in. And it hits home. I mean, I obviously want the best for my daughter, and it's at that time that I realized the influence of women in our lives, right? nurturing and growing and supporting and entertaining and all of the above, right? So over a period of time, that had a lot of influence on me, uh, female gods included, and growing up in India. So such a male dominated society, and everything is about the man, including the caste system and the dowries and everything, and even education. And that really hit home when we were looking for this nonprofit, and we were looking at the disparity
Mm,
between tracks for men and for women, right? In a male dominated society, you can be and do and steamroll everyone else. And often women as early as 11 and 12, and we've seen this with our students at Aniti. Sometimes there was a girl, or not sometimes, there was a girl missing from the English class. And my sister was running that class. My sister lives in Saratoga, and she's like, where is this particular girl? Turns out that she had a marriage proposal, Michelle, at 12.
oh
Uh,
my.
that sent a shudder, and still today there's societies where, out of sheer necessity
Mhm,
and poverty,
mhm.
women are viewed as a burden. So if you have a daughter, it's, let's pass on. She's someone else's wealth, so to
Probably.
speak. Yeah, property, right?
Yeah.
Pass her on as soon as possible. And that's just cultural. And I'm not pontificating, because you and I have had a conversation about this before. I'm as guilty of these biases as anyone else, right? We grew up with these things, and we claim everything about equality, but ingrained are these very subtle biases. And I'm the first one to say that men and women are not equal. Definitely not. They're different, right? Where we have our strengths, we have our weaknesses. Some women are known to bench press 400 pounds. I can't. But to sum it all up, I'm firmly convinced that the women are the smarter of the species, and we have a lot to learn. And these were the factors that influenced me, especially looking back at growing up in India and how women were treated, to go on this journey to create a little ripple in terms of empowering women.
I love that so much. It is something, obviously, I'm very passionate about as well. As you know, my grandparents immigrated here. I'm the first in my family to go to college. I'm the first in my family to work in technology. So I saw a chasm, even in the greatest country in the world, where you have a deficit in terms of equality, unequal pay, unequal representation, unequal leadership. And I love seeing a strong, visionary male leader come of this culture who says, you know what, we can make a change, we can make a difference, and taking steps and actions proactively. There's such a beautiful story that I'll share with you about somebody I know very similar, who was a woman who started a nonprofit called You Touch in Uganda. And when she opened the doors to the school, everybody that showed up was a man. So she stopped them at the door and she asked them to turn around, go home, get a sister, a wife, a mother, a daughter, and come back. She wanted to start from day one, equal representation in academia. And she said, if we change this, that the women of this tribe, of this culture, of this country are the ones that want to nurture and take care of everyone. So if you educate them and equalize it from the beginning, you change the future. And that's such a beautiful thing. I love what you do, professionally and personally. So I'm thrilled to have you
Yeah,
again as
well,
a guest.
very well said. So, in about 30 seconds, two similar experiences. When we started, we went to the local schools. These are public schools with probably zero computing. And one of the first requirements from the principals and everyone else were, hey, look, we're not going to let you do this only for the girls. You have to do it for the boys too. And this wasn't about equality. This was purely about empowering the male gender. And we were adamant about the fact that until and unless there's equality, we're going to make sure that the girls catch up. And we stuck to that mandate. 600 girls a year at our learning centers who are going through with English and computers. And the one thing that gave me goosebumps was last year. So we've got these learning centers that are, air conditioned. It's humid. It's hot in India. These girls go in. We give them a little snack, and it's a 3-4 hour session that they've got to commit to of learning. And one of the boys told one of our managers, watching this happening, I wish I was a girl. That was a powerful statement
Wow.
for a young boy in India to say.
That is very impressive. I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah.
And I love the ripple. And I think that you're creating it. And this platform hopefully can help encourage other leaders to understand the importance of creating that equality and mentorship for the young women, especially as they embark on their journey.
Thank you. And, kudos to you for being such an ambassador for empowering women in tech.
Thank you. Thank you. And now that we're talking about young people's journeys, I'm going to ask you a few questions about your personal journey. So, obviously, the purpose of this podcast for anyone who's just tuning in for the first time is to really understand that we celebrate a lot of leaders, their successes, and we often see where they are now at the pinnacle of their success. But we miss some steps along the way, the journey to where they got to where they are today. We miss sometimes their stumbling blocks and the lessons that they learned, and as what we call failing forward. So, my first question to you is, what was your first job and what did it teach you?
So, my life has a watershed moment, and that happened on the 12th of August, 1990, when I landed in this country, right? So I'll divide, and I've had two first jobs, so to speak. One, and I'll give you the fun one. So obviously, growing up in India, family business, all engineers, my father, my uncles, generations of engineers, brother, sister, and I was the one that was groomed to be the administrator. So I went down the line of finance and was supposed to take over managing the family business. But I often in summer would help my dad out in all the engineering and fabrication stuff, and that was some of the fun moments when we'd go out and we'd build stuff out of steel, literally, right? This was a manufacturing plant that did machinery, and so that was my early job. So I had grease, a lot of elbow grease, and a lot of hard work, and a lot of learning. Here, my first job. My journey is literally Mumbai to Malibu. That's another story as to why I picked Malibu, because I already had a master's degree, and Pepperdine was the one university that was going to recognize my Indian degrees and give me credit. So I land here, and the Indian rupee doesn't convert too much in dollars. So everyone on campus knows that, hey, 1990, this is Philip. He wants a job. Make sure that someone, if there's any open referrals. So I work for old Mrs. Hunt, who's probably about 82 or 83 years old. And I've got to go, and she lives in this gorgeous home in Malibu with a glass bottom. I'm kidding you not.
Wow.
And in 1990, $15 an hour, I had to clean the beach and then go fill the tanks of her 62 Jag. So I was quite living the life with my first jobs in both places, in India and here.
I love it. That's really, really interesting. And
Mhm.
so, what inspired you to, let's say, leave your family business of engineering and pursue a career in technology? How did you end up on the path you are now? And not only that, but becoming an entrepreneur, no less.
So one of the, and to complete, part of the earlier question as to what my learnings were,
Mm.
growing up in India in a normal household, just even a middle class household, you have a lot of help, right? You have, and I'm not being ostentatious here or pompous, but you have a driver, you have a maid, you have someone who comes in and cleans the house, and this is middle class families.
Sign me
But
up.
I know exactly.
I could use some of those things
um, so
today.
for a week in the year during the holidays, my dad would let all the staff, literally, and I'm not talking, dozens, but, these people who helped us around, take the week off, and we did the chores. And the lesson was, look, there's nothing that's menial enough that you can't do. And that's something that's held me strong even today. I would always tell my team at Aurora that I would never ask them to do anything that I wouldn't do myself. So that was one big learning. Um, so that transfers here. And how did we go from engineering to cybersecurity? Nothing short of a miracle, Michelle. So I'm in Pepperdine. Again, words around the campus that if there's any kind of jobs around, make sure that, Philip has a shot at it, because, again, he needs the money, right? Because tuition is expensive. So my computer science professor comes to me once and says, "Hey, look, I want you to cover this database class." And I couldn't spell database if you gave me all the vowels, right? It was like, "Oh, are you kidding me? No way." And he's like, "Look, Philip, it's pretty straightforward. Here's the manual. Here's the program." And it would have been Fox based or some archaic program at the time. I'm dating myself. And so I said, "Okay, fine." The money was really good. In that class was a manager from AT&T who, said, "Hey, look, you've obviously done this before," and I hadn't. And she says, "You're really good. How would you like to sign up as a contractor for AT&T to train our people who are going from, these local, back in the day, the operators were in your local zip code. AT&T had these small little locations, and they were going into mega centers. So they were being trained for computers. And so that was my first contract. That was how Aurora was born. That was my journey into IT, into technology. And then at one of a local picnic, someone said, "Hey, you know what? I heard you do computers. You do computers.
Yeah.
Can you help me with a network?" From there, there was a second company and a third. Before you know it, in our first year, we were helping Maersk, the shipping giant, with networking, and then
Wow.
moved on to finance companies in Beverly Hills, literally. So quite the journey. Uh,
Amazing.
PGP was one of our first encryption vendors, and like I've said, I've been really lucky to be at the right place at the right time with some preparation, of course.
Absolutely. And I think also they're very lucky to have you as their leader. And I'm just my personal bias knowing you. And I think you are such an inspirational leader. But you, as a young 21-year-old, what advice would you have given yourself looking backwards as you're about to embark on this journey?
So anything that I would have known more than I already did at that time would probably not have both of us talking here today, right? So probably nothing, but I understand the gist of the question. What's my learning in the last 30 years, 30 plus years? I would say a couple of things, right? So again, as we move through this need hierarchy, right, of basic food, shelter, friends, socializing, spiritual, emotional, and you have all these needs met. There's a question that I've posed in my peer group, and that's, what's your definition of happiness? And we don't teach happiness. We teach calculus. We teach, grammar and history and geography and everything else. But kudos to the millennials today, because they are truly, giving back and learning more about being happy, right? Even though that involves consuming large volumes of kale. The the point is, Michelle, that we get caught in this rat race. I did, you did, we all did, right? And especially the baby boomers, the greatest generation, the baby boomers, all about racking it up and putting our names up in lights and making sure that we were known, right? And in that rat race, somewhere, happiness got moved down. Now it's easy to talk about happiness today when
Right.
we're doing well in life and things are pretty stable. But if I could prioritize happiness a little earlier in life, I think that would have been nice. And my biggest takeaway, the one thing that made a difference to me later, and you know about this, is this book written by Dr. Larry Little called Making a Difference, right? And it talks about communication. And I think proper communication can save the world. So at 21, I was shy. I was extremely quiet, believe it or not, and very reserved.
I will never
Um,
believe it.
I most of my classmates didn't even know I existed. So if I had to go and tap 21-year-old Philip on his shoulder, I would say, "Hey, talk. communicate. And that's my strength today, right? So I obviously gravitate towards my strength. Communication, I believe, clear, detailed, crystal communication is critical.
Absolutely. I'm going to ask another question, and this wasn't on my list of questions, but
Please.
how would you define happiness? How do you find happiness today?
So I have learned from people around me, and this answer is not an original one, but it's two things, the two components. After having done, quick straw polls and surveys, and I posed this question to a group of my peers, fellow CEOs of IT companies who are about the same stage in life. And, to sum it up, it's being in the moment. This very moment, and enjoying it, and talking about the back and forth, and building these memories, and being able to then go back and reminisce a little later about, hey, you know what, that was a fun podcast, right? But living in the moment, I think, is the big one. Our mind's always going, right? We're type A's right now. We're thinking about, hey, what's going to happen in the next half hour, which report, which email, how many emails are pending. But living in the moment is huge. And the Hindu philosophy of nirvana, right? I mean, so it's a big deal. People spend lifetimes achieving nirvana, and nirvana literally translated is put out the fire, meaning, leave your desires and all your hopes and wants and everything else. And it at some point, if you talk intelligently to the concept, you'll arrive at, hey, we're here, let's live in this moment.
I love that.
And part of that for me personally, besides, which I cannot do, I promise you, right? This is why it's so appealing, is I cannot. Living in the moment and being content, right? It's part of the definition of happiness that I would like to achieve.
There's a quote that I heard once in a movie, and the movie wasn't all that good. It was Vanilla Sky, but the quote I loved, and it resonated with me. And it said, "The little things in life, there's nothing bigger." And it's just such a simple phrase, but that's so true. And I think, like you said, early in your career, aspirationally, you want the big things. You want the money and the title and all of the fame and glory and all of the things that go with that. But then you realize as you get older and more experienced that the most important things, the most valuable things are the small things, the things that you can't really quantify. You don't even know in the moment that they're going to be a big thing someday, like those experiences with your children or your family or your parents. And those are the things that are so captivating. And what I love, what you said also, is about being present. And I have this conversation a lot because obviously we work in technology and we always have devices, iPads and TVs and computers and phones that we have 24/7 glued to our hands at all times. And then how do you take that out, and how do you pause and truly be present in the moment, in your words, in your thoughts, and your actions? So I love that. And I didn't know the meaning nirvana. So thank you for explaining it.
And what you said is so true, right? I'm reading this book, Sapiens, at the moment. And in the book, at the point where I am, he talks about the fact that in our houses, between the computer taskbar, the microwave, the television, the Android and iPhones, we probably have more devices that tell us what the time is than most medieval towns.
Right.
Right? Because they had the one central clock that wasn't really accurate, and it didn't matter because it was more about when the sun rose and the sun set. So yes, there's much to be said and a point to be made about living in the moment.
That's so true. And now I have to question why I'm late so often. It's cultural. So my question for you is, you've had a lot of successes. What would you say is your biggest failure, and what did it teach you?
That's what this podcast is all about, isn't it? Fail forward, yes. Here is, I've had a few days to think about this, and I would say, missing 9,000 shots, losing 300 games, and missing 26 game-winning shots. That's what the greatest of all times, Michael Jordan, said about his career, right? That he actually missed 9,000 shots and he lost 300 games. And when he had the ball at a buzzer beater game-winning shot, he missed 26 times. And he said, if it wasn't for that, he wouldn't be where he is, right? So he built on those failures, and I thought, wow, what a great lesson. And if I can juxtaposition that with another concept, and that's our reptilian brains, right, where we constantly measure risk and reward. Hey, fire is hot. I need to reach for my s'more. I might burn a few of an eyebrow, but the s'more is really good. So let me measure the risk and reward and go reach, right?
I just got some s'mores.
And so we're constantly doing this. And so to answer your question, I think I haven't failed enough. Obviously, it's a numbers game. Failing moves you forward, as the title of your podcast, no doubt. I'm content with where I am at the moment, and I don't know if I had more failures, where I would be, but obviously, if I measure myself in mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual in all four areas as we try to lead a balanced life, we're constantly trying to do better, right? So whether it's bench pressing 400 pounds, which I can't do, and I'll consider myself a failure, and being a little more transparent and warm and emotionally connected, I can consider myself a failure, or, spiritually or religiously, having the ability to have a better aura and better connection with everything around us, or mentally for that matter, to be able to challenge myself. So I know it's not an answer, but I truly am giving you this answer, is that I've jumped out of a plane, done some skydiving, and lived to tell about it. And one of the most scariest moments of our lives, but we live very sheltered, or I live a very sheltered life, right? Literally, from parents, middle class parents who gave us everything we wanted, to then aspiring for a great education and coming to a country where there's nothing between you and your goals except yourself. That generally it builds a sense of complacency. So without taking irreversible action, I would say that I haven't failed enough.
I really like that idea. I like the idea, and I like the quote that you gave by Michael Jordan. And it reminds me of, there's a museum here locally in Florida. It's the Edison Ford Museum. And when you walk in, it talks about how many failures they had, right as you enter the building. It's like, I've had 1,256 failures this month. Time to have another one. I'm that much closer to getting it right. So there's all of these ideals of, taking risks. So if you had to challenge yourself, what risk would you take moving forward? What's next that you can challenge yourself to do and be willing to fail at then?
Actually influencing and making a difference. So at the point where I am now, and going forward, it's about, and again, I'm going to digress for a minute, but Sean Akers written this great book about happiness, right? The Happiness Advantage. And I think the book opens with the fact that they've done a survey all over the world, and whether they've asked people deep in the Amazon jungle, or at some major financial center in downtown New York, on Wall Street, generally the answer has been the same. If you had to live your life again or look back, what would you do differently? And that's the answer, is generally to be remembered, right? We all want to be remembered. We all want to make a difference. And for me at this point, it would be anything to make a bigger difference. I wish I had to start my foundation a little earlier, gather more family, influence more people to join the cause, empower women better, and truly up my game across all these four areas or facets that I told you about. So make no mistake, I'm very happy with where I am. I'm content. I'm learning to live in the moment. But since you forced the question, that's my answer, and I'm standing by it.
Absolutely. No, I think that's fantastic. And, there's a quote by Margaret Mead, and I don't want to get it wrong, but it's something like, never doubt that a small community can make a difference. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has. And whether you start it 30 years ago or you start today, I think that there's just as much meaning and impact in what can be as to what has been. So you started and you've continued a conversation now that hopefully can, be shared with other people within the community, within your technology ecosystem, within the countries that we are advocating and championing for change all around the world. I think that would be hugely impactful.
I concur.
So here's my next question. You mentioned something earlier about guidance and mentorship, and you touched upon your father. I'm curious, who are your top 3 mentors in your life, and what did they teach you and why? How has it impacted you professionally or personally?
So, two pieces to that question, mentor and influence, right? I mean, so if I was looking at the people that influenced me, obviously it's family, it's parents in one big group, all the values. I'm sorry to tell our younger listeners that there's absolutely no doubt that you are going to turn into your parents, and something I remind my kids all the time, and they probably wake up in a cold sweat sometimes but it's true, isn't it? I mean, I pause and I'm like, wow, I remember my dad doing this or having this conversation. I'm like, yeah, true. And also some of the wisdom that was handed down, right, came from my parents and the guidance and the values and the structure. So when it comes to influencers, that's one big group. And then, of course, my wife, my partner in life, and the person who I spend a lot of time with, have conversations with, I'm able to bounce ideas off, and who, by the way, the two of us are diametrically opposite. At 6 o'clock in the morning, you'll find me crazily running on the local beach here, and while my wife is very comfortably ensconced in a Tempur-Pedic bed. But
That bucket.
yeah, but that's the juxtaposition that's fun, right? And to look at things and be influenced by a 180-degree different opinion, and then of course, everyone around me, my employees and everything, but my kids, looking at life through the lens of my kids has been very influential. Coming from a very conservative culture in India, and a conservative background. I've told my daughter that, hey, and I promise I'm joking because I don't want 700 emails after this podcast, but I told her she's getting married at 30 and she's only going to get married to someone who loves her more than I do. So, but, one of the things that she's always said, I mean, when she's going out with a group or, going out on a date, and it's like, Dad, trust me. And it doesn't mean much till you've actually got to trust your daughter to be able to take the right decisions. We've got our kids from the time that they can actually understand, which is about 3 years old, till about 13 when they start developing their own opinions. It's about 10 years. It goes pretty quick. And that's the time you have to get everything you need to know into their little brains, right? And then they get their driver's license and take off. And so my kids have been great influencers. With Emily, it was about trust and watching her grow up and grow up a confident, empowered woman. With my son, the inspirational moment or the influential moment. So he went to local Catholic school, and I was slightly short of a cussing sailor. And this one moment when we're at this traffic light, I missed the light. I know he's going to be really close for school, and I go, oh, I probably it's debatable whether I said, oh, or I used the F word. And he goes, Dad, that's a bad word. And I'm like, wow, you know what? Can I express myself, as therapeutic as cussing is, can I express myself a little more clearly, right? And I use that as a moment of influence. And no doubt, if you'll find me alone or in very select company, I will blurt out a few expletives. But, for the most part, things like that have had influence on me. For mentors, Michelle, there is no doubt that front and center is the Masterminds peer group by Ingram. We're put together with a group of like-minded people in different geographies doing different businesses, having IT in common. And every time we have these 2-day meetings every quarter at different locations, I come back with nuggets of information, of improvement, of doing better. So that group is a gift that keeps on giving. And Aniti, the foundation, was born out of one of those conversations and meetings.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's very great to hear. And so does it, the peer group, does it travel around California, around the country, and you just
So
them?
we're, anything between 9 to 12 business owners that meet once a quarter, and we meet in each other's geographies. So if we're California businesses, we'll host, or someone in Rochester, New York, or Duluth will host, and it just turns around and goes around once a quarter.
I think that's so great. I love the idea of peer groups and associations with like-minded individuals that can give insight and perspective to only the things that you're experiencing in your particular roles, which leads me to my next question conveniently. There are a lot of misconceptions about the space of cybersecurity right now. We know that prior to COVID, 44% of companies did not allow their employees to work from home. Overnight, that all changed thanks to a global pandemic. Cybersecurity, cyber threats, and hacking was on a paramount high. So your business is more critical now than ever before, especially in the future of work. And also as an entrepreneur, there's a lot of misconceptions. Oh, it's just easy to be an entrepreneur. Everyone can be an entrepreneur. What would you say to debunk any of the myths about your role? To anyone who might have a misconception, or maybe some of the myths you told yourself before you actually got deep into your role.
So here's a soundbite that might shock you, but cybersecurity, the two words in itself, is probably the biggest oxymoron of our times, right? Because, if someone wants to get to you, they can, unless you're on an island, you've got all your data encrypted, and you've torn out of the wall all kinds of internet and Wi-Fi plugs, right? Then you're safe. But in as much as we lead connected lives, we've got to share and exchange data. We're prone to attack at any point in time. And we've got to understand that and not be lulled into any false sense of security. Whether you think your 27-letter character password is the greatest of all times, it isn't. With enough of computing power, it can be broken. So goes with encryption. So goes with your multi-factor authentication. I mean, come on. The bad guys have taken down the White House websites. They've stolen 22 million records of our security personnel. So nothing is sacred or safe, so to speak, because like I said, on the conditions that we've got to live connected lives, we are subject to exposure, and more so now than ever, right? You've the colonial hack and the food company, the meat processing plant, and it just goes on and on and on. And cybersecurity, cyber crime pays more than running drugs, right? So
Wow.
we're susceptible, and my words of wisdom are exercise caution, and just don't lull yourself into complacence.
I think those are very wise, sage advice.
Thank
And
you.
what about as an entrepreneur? What would be the biggest myth that you would debunk about anybody who thinks, I want to be an entrepreneur? What is it like to really be one for 30 years?
Well, the grass is always greener on the other side. In the next room is my dear wife, who's worked for Mattel for the last 30 years and loves her job. The first day she went to work, she's like, wow, this is fun. The entire floor is covered with plush toys, and our vice presidents are running down the corridor with water guns testing under the guise of testing toys, right? And here I am trudging downtown to get to work, and that was one of the reasons actually that I started Aurora in the first place. So it's hard work. Anything from the kitchen sink getting clogged to one of your employees having an emotional breakdown because her husband or wife looked at him or her wrong in the morning, that you've now got to deal with for the day, or a complex issue with not having enough insurance coverage or making sure that your quote is right, and everything in between is part of the job. And so, while I would be definitely guilty of being in control of my destiny, so to speak, as a business owner, and the fact that, you think you can show up to work late or take a day off, it's hard work. You're always connected and you're always on. But at the same time, it's fun. We're all different personalities. We all gravitate towards different things in life. And for me, I think being an entrepreneur was a great fit, and I'm enjoying my role.
I love it. I just think you need a couple plushies and water guns, and you'll have an equally fun Mattel-like atmosphere.
I do benefit sometimes from a little baby Yoda that's hanging right above my desk, and I know Janet is actually. I sent Janet one, right?
Oh,
She's a Star Wars fan.
jealous I am.
Good one.
Now, I love everything that you said. And my question for you, because we talked a lot about finding mindfulness almost and finding your inner peace and being present. What do you listen to? What resources do you have? What podcasts, what books, what exercises do you do to be inspired, to get excited, to find your inner, chi?
My definition again of happiness is, a Saturday afternoon after a nice lunch, sitting in a hammock somewhere with a gentle breeze and a book in hand. However, that changed after the kids showed up, right? As Saturday afternoons was replaced by Little League and soccer and basketball and all of that. Today, I commit to at least an hour every morning, to some kind of cardio. And I do that religiously. And I know that that's life changing. And I will, from now to the day I die, will be ongoing forever. And I use that time with the greatest secret ever for me, at least. Most of you and your listeners might know about this, but it's Audible. And I've just discovered it about 6 months ago. And I am racing through books, by the hour. So I've read some great books, listened to great books. And the beauty of Audible is it goes, through the ear canal directly into your brain, and there's nothing in between, right, to distract you. So it's been fun. I've read some really good books during that time. I try to surround myself constantly by smarter people, you included, Michelle, and I'm always learning. The peer group plays a big role, and to have thought-provoking conversations. So that's me.
So I love Audible. It's one of my TED Talks. I do all of those things when I run. And I discovered running also during the pandemic. I always used to go to a gym, but I bought a Peloton. I began running outside. I did external things. If I'm on the Peloton, I have an instructor, there's music. I'm not really doing anything else. But Audible outside, so many good books. And sometimes the author themselves, especially if it's a documentary, they read it in their own
Absolutely.
voice.
Yes.
I adore that. That's such a great way to understand somebody better. And I love like all of the self-help,
Yep.
inspirational leadership books. Those are, kind of the inspiration of this podcast is really, I think to myself, I wonder what their journey was like, especially if it's somebody who hasn't yet written a book like yourself. And I love for them to share it, with me, not just at the hotel lobby bar or on a conference call, but also for everybody to hear the gems of wisdom and perspective that you have and kind of capture this, for time. I hope your children listen to it and they learn something new about their dad as well. For you, in terms of your traveling, I know that we both share the wanderlust bug, and we both enjoy traveling, and we have a similar destination in store for our next trip. Would you like to tell the listeners where you're going?
Absolutely. So my bucket list was to take my kids to every continent. And for that reason, right, the moment I made the journey from Mumbai to Malibu, I know what a life-changing experience it is. And once we've gotten to the destination, how the heck do I give my children a better experience? And so I decided, look, let's go to every continent. And it was just a thing. Well, today we've done 6, Michelle, and you and I both have one left, and we're going to do it in January, and that's Antarctica.
Yes. And the funny thing is, we both are going at the same time on two different ships
Sure.
passing the night.
So hopefully we'll bump into each other.
I hope so. Not literally, but
No,
just
exactly.
we don't need a Titanic type experience, but I would love that. I think it would be so incredible. And similarly, I love learning about different people, their journeys, their cultures, tasting their food, dancing to their music, experiencing and immersing ourselves. And that's what I love about you. You have similar passions, as I do: technology, philanthropy, culturally. So I'm so excited to compare stories with you. And for anyone who has not yet connected with you, how can our audience connect with you so that they can follow up if they have questions?
Thank you for that opportunity. And I do hope your listeners connect with me. And I'll tell you how in a minute. And I'll give them a reason to connect with me. I'm always looking for my next big read. So I'm going to share with you 3 books that I absolutely love. One is Younger Next Year. And it's, speaking of being read by the author, it's read by Chris Crowley. It's hilarious. He does a great job. So Younger Next Year is a great book. Grit by Angela Duckworth. You are the epitome of grit.
Thank you.
The subtitle is The Power of Passion and Perseverance. And she says, look, grit can trump talent. And those are powerful words. And then the last one's Mindset by Carol Dweck. So these are 3 great books that I'm offering you. Please reach out to me, share your top reads, and you can find me, Philip de Souza, that's PhilipDesouza on LinkedIn, or P de Souza on Twitter.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And
Thank
here's
you.
my final buzz round question. I'm going to jot all those books down. I'll drop them in our comments as well so anyone
you.
can listen and give you notes. One of my favorites I will share with you is Never Eat Alone. It is an incredible book, and I relate to it in a lot of ways. But it's about the journey of somebody who grows up with, it's almost similar to Rich Dad, Poor Dad, in the sense that he learns all of these lessons from a different space than how he grew up. And I think that that is the mentorship and cross-pollination of cultures, and understanding that your wisdom that you impart can really dramatically change someone's life. So he makes an effort throughout the entire journey of his life in the book, telling how he always chose to find somebody every single day to talk to and learn from and eat with. And very, very incredible read. I'd highly recommend it.
I'm going to add that to my list.
Yes. So, buzz round question. If we could switch roles and you can jump into this seat, what would you ask yourself that I missed?
That's a tough one. I think you've done fine. You've asked me all the questions. The one I did answer willingly was the number of books I've read. So that would probably be it. We've talked about this often, in paying it forward, right, and inspiring future generations to come. What would be some advice that we would give a potential person that's either looking for a job? And I know you usually ask these questions off your podcast. And for me, I'm going to answer that question is that, I firmly believe that if there's one place in the world that there's nothing between you and your goals except yourself, it is this great country. It's the United States of America. That's number one. Number two, when you're looking for a job, appear appealing, right? There's not much difference between a job interview and a first date, right? You've got to appear appealing, and you've got to make sure that you are wanted. And if you are, and if you are the prettiest guy or the buffest guy or the prettiest girl on the list, and you appear appealing, and that's what it's about. And I like Reed Hastings' book, No Rules Rule. So he was the CEO of Netflix. And he says, look, when I'm hiring people, I'm looking for 2 things. I'm looking for a rock star, right? So be that rock star, be the really best, most phenomenal, credible expert in what you're doing. It could be collecting frogs or writing code, but be really good at it, right? Be passionate about what it is, and hold the interest of the organization high at all times. So that would be my advice to future job seekers.
I love that. Philip,
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being such an inspirational guest, sharing your journey with us and your future path. And I am so thrilled to have you in my life as an inspirational mentor and friend. So thank you for being a guest
I'll
today.
feel the same way. The feeling's mutual. And thank you for putting me down on history with this podcast, Michelle. Thanks for the opportunity.
As Steve Familio of the Top Gun show would say, millions and millions of people are watching here today. Let's
Yes.
hope that we can inspire them all. And I thank you for your time. Everyone, go out and don't be scared to fail forward and live. Take care.